I just came from town though, and I had to pass two two sets of traffic lights on the country road that goes past where my cousin works on the way to Gorkot, and yes, I wasn't too pleased with that. Trying to cross the A road was very difficult. It's busier than I've ever seen it, you know. The traffic seems to peak in the midsummer, around June, July for some reason. The children aren't out of school yet though, they're not on their school holidays yet. I'd love to see, you know, what the English wilderness and landscape was like before industrialised farming came along, and also foreign species of plants that sort of, I don't know what this is, that sort of overwhelm all of the native species. How many of those have come? This is a burdock, it's a big one. Yes, I'd like to see what it was in the pre-industrial times and how people lived and farmed, what the houses looked like, what sort of animals there were roaming around, you know, wolves and things, and lynx and foxes and all sorts really. The deer that I tend to see nowadays are often very stunted, small, like dog-sized deer. That's mostly what I see. I very rarely see like full-sized deer, especially in packs. Looking at some of those old Guild Wars music videos and stuff, and yeah, the culture, you kind of cringe looking at how things used to be and how you kind of went along with it. It's a bit cringe to look back at it. Kind of makes you think about like personal evolution and sort of becoming more mature and self-aware as you get older, but then it makes you think of like life as a system that facilitates your personal evolution in terms of like mental and I don't know, spiritual even. Sometimes I think like things happen in a certain way that they're supposed to happen to facilitate that, but then that kind of makes you think, how could that be possible? Because that means that other people are just like tools, as in like illusions, and then you get into sort of solipsism. Solipsism is like when you believe that you're the only one that's actually alive and everything else isn't real. Or some people think that like they are God and everyone else doesn't exist, which doesn't seem right to me either. So it's almost like, does something make like small random changes that sort of steers people, like a butterfly effect, that sort of steers people towards certain outcomes, or to be in certain situations where they can meet other people and things like this. Now this is sort of the domain of the sort of what's called like spiritual community on the internet. There's big divisions between the different camps of lifestyle schools of thought and levels of awareness within that, but yeah, sometimes it feels though like with the things I'm able to perceive, it feels like life itself is like a dream, basically. I just think like one day, perhaps in a few minutes, I'll wake up and things will go back to how they were like 10, 20 years ago. But then even back then, people were talking about UFOs, flying saucers, ghosts, and I was the only one that really cared about it, as in took it seriously, researched all the books and whatever. That's kind of how I got into it. But then, well, things have advanced a lot since then. Now, like nowadays, the world is so insane that it's almost unrecognizable, compared to 10 years ago. But is it just that my personal perception has increased? I don't know. I think it's a combination of both, perhaps. Now, this is something where you really need to listen to the experts, the top level sort of, I don't know what you'd call them, like researchers or like seers. Especially the older ones who've lived for much longer, and they've gained perception, a high level of perception decades ago. This is why I like this guy called Howdy Mikowski. So he's written books about the Grand Tartaria, the Chicago World's Fairs, these things that I'd never heard of before. You need to look into it. It's related to this thing called the mud flood. Again, I'd never heard of it until a few years ago. There's all these different things, that's not important. What's happening to England is tragic. What's happening to Europe, many of us are aware of it since like 2014 or earlier. Many of us have got in trouble trying to do something about it. You need to look at it in the proper context, which few people actually can, because they don't have the perception. But if our history was real, if the history of the world was what we really were taught, as in human nature and the British Empire and things like that, then this situation would probably have never arisen. So that's a bit of a clue as to what's going on. There are people who just blame it on one group of people, and they say it's all human nature and psychological. But those people, the reason they say that is they haven't had access to the information, they haven't had the experiences to get a better handle on how the world actually operates. So this is something I realised recently, was one of the reasons why we're seeing this mass immigration, this globalism, is because, well, on an individual level, they see the foreign people see the world as unfair, and they want to have the same quality of life that we do without putting the work in, but they feel that they shouldn't have to put the work into it because we got it unfairly. Like, the world is unfair and that's why we're living in comfort. Whereas others would say that there's differences between people in their abilities, and that's why some people are able to make a comfortable life for themselves, whereas other people just live in constant chaos. I think there's an element of truth to that. Like, once you go past, even within evolution, but once you go past evolution, you realise that what you perceive as a person or different people they're not subject to science, they're not subject to materialism. They can be created, and they can be created differently by whoever created this world. And yes, they can be fundamentally different. What you perceive as a person might not actually be a person, as in what you are is not what they are. But the reason they come there is self-interest, and they justify it in various ways. But it seems like they're happy sacrificing England and English culture for the sake of globalism, creating globalism wherein they live within our countries. Now, some of them are not as ideological as that. They're just more like the criminal-minded type, where they just have a very base instincts of eat, have sex, listen to rap music. But from what I've been able to perceive recently, the real reason they're being brought here in massive numbers by the system is it's to dissolve our local culture, our communities, and the objective of that is to get everyone under this globalist system, where you're reading Twitter, you're reading Reddit, you're watching the news, the fake news media, you're absorbing all of the sort of state propaganda about global warming, the new Star Wars. You're watching the new Star Wars, you're thinking it's good, you're supporting the LGBT agenda. So this here is the sort of thing that I've always been against, but see, the average person is on a lower sort of spiritual level, of something's different about them, and they have a different essence, and that's why they don't care about the environment. They don't care about other people. It's not purely psychological or IQ based. So the idea is to dissolve local culture and get everyone tuned into this globalist homogeneous system, wherein they don't talk to their neighbour, they don't walk around, talk to each other, go to the pub, figure out what they believe about the world and share that, come to a consensus with their local community, govern their local community. What they do is they look to the government, they look to the scientists, and they're going to tell you all these things like space travel is real, we went to the moon, all this sort of dubious information. And what that's going to sort of achieve is the spiritual objectives of the system, to make people a war of perception, essentially, to make people believe in whatever it is, and that's typically anti-spiritual. So we're talking about transhumanism, atheism, these sorts of things, virtual reality, AI, all these sorts of things. Objective is to change people's perception of what they are and where they are. Most people cannot perceive what we call the dark reality, which is the script running that's manipulating everything to achieve this objective.